thank you for joining us on stage here and being with us to go through this session. This is a great opportunity where I think we've heard from each of you this morning and this afternoon. Brilliant presentations, and thank you for sharing those with us. But it gives us an opportunity where we can start to now hear from the audience in terms of some of the questions they might have come to us with. I'm going to start with a couple of questions here in terms of how we're looking at the biggest challenges, I guess, that was resolved by adopting a location-centric solution. And if I may, maybe start with Wee Jian, actually, from Singapore Land Authority.
Sure. So I guess for preventive healthcare or social prescribing, basically, a lot of the activities are basically in informal locations. They are not necessarily registered to an address, and they potentially could move around as well. So being able to ascribe a location to it, basically, is a very powerful tool in which basically welfare coordinators can now confidently inform their clients or consult with their clients and recommend activities that are close to their residences that they know is accessible to them, rather than just referencing a list and trying to make an assumption.
Excellent. Anyone else that would like to address that?
For us, it's a lot on safety management, because when we use a location-based technology here, we know exactly who is working at the port, how things are happening, where the ships are, which spot in the ship, which spot outside the ship, and that is really relevant, because otherwise you have to just imagine deploying 100 over people just on the ground, just to see how your port workers are faring, right? So all that is saved with this technology. Yeah.
Thanks, Cynthia.
In my view, it's definitely not technology, because you guys take care of the technology, right? So it's the data and the people. I think reliable data is at the core, at the center of what we are doing. Maintaining this core reliable data over time is one biggest challenge that I would think.
Great point, Victor. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for us, can you hear me? Yeah. For us, the biggest impact has been in productivity, in being able to have at the fingertips all the data they need to effectively plan and design for a city. So our planners do not need to go down to site as often to measure things, to look for information. Of course, they still need to go down to site. We can't replace that. But within the comfort of their homes and their offices, they can now access data sets that they perhaps would not even be able to get if they go down to site. So productivity as well as unlocking new capabilities has been a key impact in adopting a location-based approach. Yeah.
Excellent.
So just follow on that.
Yeah.
There are many users here, the geospatial data users, and you need providers who are just focusing on ensuring the data that you want there all the time, up to date with the quality that is useful for everyone. I think that is something that we need to be aware in mind.
Excellent. And Xiaoyan, yeah.
And I guess one of our challenge initially was to really integrate this geospatial system with our other systems, our other data systems, and that could take a bit of time. But I think the impact we see thereafter was the precise, tagging of the location, and that it really increases our response time when we look at the supply zone, we look at the pipeline and everything. So yeah, in short, thanks.
No, great points from all of you there, and thank you for sharing those, because I think we've seen that in your presentations as well, where I think from a technology standpoint, we know it's there. We all carry devices with us now. We're all geolocated in some way or form. People know where we are. We know how to access that information. But it's bringing that and integrating that into your workflows and into your areas of expertise. So certainly that's what I think we've all seen throughout the day, and that's been great. Of course, that's not necessarily an easy process all the time, and there's some challenges I'm sure you were facing as you went into that. So what advice would you give to our audience here today who might be looking to geo-enable an existing business process or operation. And if I may, Xiao Yun, actually, for what you did for the water sampling. There.
I think the first thing we did was to really map the end-to-end business process and really understanding what each stakeholder wants. Yeah, very often it could be something I imagine, but when the ground staff, they have very, very different feedback. And leading to that is actually assembling a very good team that has multiple perspectives of how this should turn out, and not just from a management point of view. And really investing in the UI, UX, the user experience and user interface. Yeah, and basically I think this few points. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else?
All right,
Share on
I'll
that?
chip
Yeah.
in.
Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks.
Coming from a port perspective, right, I think it's very important that it's fancy. Thinking about it, ArcGIS is very fancy, right? Just imagine having access to 3D, 2D, and all is very exciting. But what's important is identifying how you want to use it first. End-to-end process is definitely one way to go. Another way to do it is, how will you, as an individual user, and you map out your different roles and your stakeholders in your organization, how do you envision that particular user role to be adopting and using that particular 2D or 3D visualization and functionality that you're giving in their day-to-day jobs? And that needs to be defined very clearly. That's a bit of a journey that we went through as well, because we looked around the world whether are there any digital twins that we could actually replicate in multi-purpose industries, multi-purpose port. There's a lot in the container side of the business. That's the sexy shipping, you know. Where we come from on multi-purpose bulk carriers, you don't see that. So that's where we had to go back and look at it. How do we ensure that what we create is actually of relevant use to our users? So it's very specific use cases that were taken on board and built into ArcGIS itself. And that is actually an advice that, you know, anyone who's going very new into this space and you have no one to look at, start thinking from that angle. Yeah.
I would say that if you currently have an operation that's analog, that is critical, that's very important in your work, I said just start now. There's no time for you to wait. You just don't wait. Nothing new will happen, right? You just start now, digitalize your process. This is important. The moment you digitalize the process, your data also in a digital form, and you will know, you realize very soon what are the benefits of doing that. When the processes is digitalized, data are digitalized, you can connect with other systems, and you'll come a lot of benefits. Yeah, so I said, don't wait. Just get some help and move on.
That's a great point.
I had the same advice as Victor. It's just to start, but start small, right? Many of times we look at a daunting task in mapping out the entire business process. Many of us are in complex businesses, industries, and it can be quite difficult to look where to start. But if we can identify a small section that we see it's ready to be transformed and it's impactful, and focus on that, and once we are able to demonstrate to other stakeholders that it is possible, it would start the ball rolling and everyone will come aboard to go with you. So I think that really resonated with me.
I think along similar lines, what I would usually recommend is we have to be quite strategic with what we do. Definitely geospatial is a very powerful tool, but it's not necessarily a magic bullet. So we will have to find use cases in which we can show significant value add and are achievable. So hence, start small, be strategic. A lot of people are not necessarily very familiar with geospatial. They see it generally runs as a sort of invisible technology. It works in the background. It works on your phones, but you don't necessarily know how it works. But it can bring so much value, especially if you have a lot of manual processes that require you to make some assumptions about distance, about location, for example. And we've been working with other agencies, and we've managed to sort of bring down processes from a couple of days of work to a couple of minutes, basically, simply just by using the right technology at the right time. So I think the value is just identifying where geospatial can add have the most value add, and then apply it in a correct and scalable manner.
Perfect. And if I may add, that's something that certainly I experienced in my time back in the UKHO, where you're looking at very traditional methods and workflows, and as you say, the time is now. Just get started and see where the value add comes from that, because now you start to see how that geospatial information is no longer just a hard copy chart or a map. It's being used in many different applications, used in many different tools, and enabling so many people in the geospatial industry. So, great answers. And I'm actually just waiting for a few questions just to come through on the app. I think Sharon's just going to update us on here. But yeah, this is great for us to hear, because you guys are pioneering kind of the industry, the market here in the region here in Singapore directly. So with that, I think we've got some questions that have come through, and this one's directed for you, Victor. Question 1, data collection and management is the key success factor to geospatial solutions. How does SLA upkeep the currency and accuracy of data amid ANAs and redevelopments?
Yeah, so there are different tracks where data can be captured and managed. One is definitely through regulatory processes. So this is generally the different agencies through their regulatory processes capture data. And very often this kind of data sometimes are useful, sometimes are not very useful, because they are captured for certain purposes, regulatory purposes, right? We have to look at it, we have to see whether the process can be tweaked, can be changed to capture the data for the purpose of, not just for the purpose of the regulatory process, but for the purpose of information. That's one. Another track usually is we look at programs. Programs, these are specialized or specially designed program. For example, National 3D Mapping Program that has been designed in such a way that with the purpose of capturing data, information that could be shared as a base, as foundational based data information that could be shared with as many users as possible. So the principle is capture once, used by many. That is the second track. So generally, these are the tracks that would capture many data sets, authoritative, that can be used by the different user. Of course, the third track would be on the voluntary capturing basis, or NGO, or the third party way of capturing. And of course, we need to know every single piece of information, where do they come from, and then manage them accordingly. And of course, last but not least, not forgetting the private sector also capture a lot of data for the purpose, for commercial purposes. And we have to look at them clearly, the different types of data, how do you incorporate that into the big pool of national spatial data infrastructure?
Fantastic. And actually that leads very nicely into another question that was posed for Julian at URA. What benefits will there be when different types of users, both government and commercial, are able to use and collaborate on ePlanet X in the future?
Yep, certainly. I think the simplest answer is we only have one Singapore, one environment, whereas we have many different stakeholders working in the same space. So everybody aligning to the same data set, the same platform, will certainly enable us to have a common language to communicate our ideas and our plans. And we certainly see benefit in also uplifting the industry to do better, so that as a whole, Singapore's built environment would be a lot more sustainable and enduring for all of us in the future.
Excellent, thank you. And actually, again, they're all leading nicely into each other, actually. So for Jurong Port, actually, this is, what challenges did the JP Glass team face in integrating the various data sources into a single platform?
Yep, thank you for that question, because that remains very memorable to the team as well as the team in Esri. So thank you to the team in Esri, right? So let's break this problem out to the types of data we have, right? So there's textured data through the map layers, There's also structured data that we typically capture and unstructured information. So there were problems in all three areas. Let's be honest about it here. So first challenge for textured layer on the map itself, even though we managed to draft out the nice symbologies and nice layers on the map, there were problems with the map loading up fully. So there were performance issues which we were fine-tuning it along the way. That involves the way we retrieve our data sets and the way we actually optimize on the app itself. So there were browser optimizations done. That's one level of it. Second, on structured data, which is where we receive the operational information or operational transaction information that gets reflected onto JP Glass itself, we have legacy systems as well. So as we are embarking on a transformation journey, we are actually replacing some of our legacy applications. We are also building new applications. The new applications, easy, because data formatting, data design, all that is already in place, and we use various formats for that integration. However, the problem came about with the legacy applications. You know, the ones that are pretty much built on client app. You know, we still have a little bit of those residual. And those systems also contain critical information. That required a little bit more extensive work. So we had to create a separate table, a totally different data design out of it, format of data as well, so that to ensure that we get the right data and the right format, and it links in to the story that we are trying to show to our users that this is what's happening in the port. Then the third piece, on unstructured information, which is very crucial because we are observing safety, we are observing operations, our images that we capture, that required a different way of actually integrating it. So we use sort of a semi-published subscription framework for that. That took a little bit of time for us to build because we were new to it as an organization. So that is something that we worked also collaboratively with the Esri team in terms of how to publish real-time information of images as well as ground incidents that's happening. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess along that same thread, like your staff that you have on board are obviously trained using geospatial information or using field applications, and actually this leads into a question for PUB, which how did you face the challenge of not having access to the internet for field workers when sending updates to GI system, and how did you solve that, as well as enabling the staff?
Well, that's a good question. And there's also something that we fear. And so there's not just the internet, and we do need to interface into the GOMEX system. Yeah, so essentially, unfortunately, if we do have internet issues and stuff, we do have to rely on other forms of communication as of now. But hopefully, in the future, we could have something that come out of it. But as for now, we do rely on the internet, pretty much.
And I think the technology itself, though, allows you to capture the information at least.
Yes, that's right.
You're still enabling the field workers to capture that information on the spot, geolocate that information.
So we don't lose that information, but it gets transmitted later. So that's part of it that we manage with. And in the meantime, if we are pressed for time for answers, then we have to do calls and stuff like that. But yeah, very much. I think what we really appreciate is that we don't lose the information. It's just the communication part. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
And again, and carrying that on actually is some good questions here. So this is related to SLA and the SingHealth presentation you gave earlier, talking mainly about the volunteers. So the question here is around whether any partners involved in outsourcing data collection of the assets in the community, and were the volunteers from the community or people from SingHealth? How were they enabled to use the system?
So it was a mix of basically people from SingHealth, people from SingHealth networks, and also people from the various volunteer organizations around as well. So we worked with a very select group. These were, so we don't necessarily open the system to everyone, but we opened it to a select group of volunteers who were willing to invest their time and help us in this effort. It enabled us to sort of maintain quality, because these were people that would be trained properly they were briefed properly on how to input the data, on how to use the tools, and that helped us to actually manage access, but also manage the quality of the data as well.
Excellent. And I guess this leads to then, when we're talking about the quality of data that is being captured out there, I know there was a few references to, using our mobile applications is now making things a little simpler and easier to use. But this question is back to URA, Julian. How did you ensure the quality and accuracy of the 3D data that URA was collecting and using then for the visualization and analysis?
Certainly, I think the accuracy of the data is something important to ensure your modeling and simulation results are accurate. If the data is not clean, you're going to get bad and inaccurate results. So there are multiple ways we do this. One, certainly we rely on partners like Dr. Victor Khoo, SLA, to ensure that the data being captured is done in a state-of-the-art manner that ensures high accuracy and something that we can trust. So the base 3D urban model of Singapore is something that SLA helps to capture, and it's something that we use as a base model to support our planning. But on top of that, this is where the localized knowledge of the planner and being able to understand what's in his planning area, having ground knowledge comes into play, where he can quickly check whether this data set is up to date. Is there a missing feature that was just built a month ago? Do we need to supplement that data with new BIM data, for example? And having that discipline to check before you use it to inform your decision is something that we still very much need in this process. It's not something you can take for granted.
Yeah. And I think that's a big, kind of positive note here for Singapore that I've seen certainly is how across the government agencies, the integration of data and the sharing of that data is already happening. And it's amazing to see that go forward. But Victor, did you want to comment on anything from that?
I would have to say that the recognition of the source of the data and of course the quality of the data is very important in all applications, and it's not just the quality, the right scale and the right resolution of the data is also very important in the different applications. You often hear people would say that, oh no, I do not need such a high resolution data. I can live with very low resolution data. But I'm not saying that it's wrong to say that, but it's really not who doesn't want better data set to do their work, right? And that will bring value to the work, sometimes unintended value on top of what you just want. So I guess the understanding of the quality of data is just one part of it. The scale, the resolution, and then what else you can do with it, an extension of it, not just 2D but 3D, and then you can get a lot of value out from there.
Fantastic, yeah, and I think that's where really we've seen that advancement, in terms of, there are levels of requirements in terms of what people need and what people use. Of course, we're moving to the advancements of 3D, and we've seen some of that today in some of the presentations, which brings us to one question actually, which relates to the 3D visualization we saw in JP Glass. And could you share any user cases that you might have seen has the requirement now for 3D in that environment?
So 3D is going to be another set of BTS for us. So that is a work in progress, as we have shown as well. And one area that we are looking at is also studying on storage compliance. How can we actually reflect storage compliance when a ship is alongside and leverage on 3D? Another area would be on facilities itself. Is there an opportunity for us to understand optimization of our warehouse and our yard spaces through 3D imaging? And how should we dissect it? Now this is the tricky bit, right? How do we dissect it? Vertical, horizontal, and then do we need to go deep, Do we need to go broad? That's where a lot of BTS is going to be done for that. But these are some of the initial use cases. There's going to be a lot more, but that's as we incrementally build our source applications. As rightly pointed out by Dr. Khoo himself, right? It's a reflection of how much data we can accumulate and aggregate as well. And we need to ensure that our source applications are also built and catered for that. That data availability needs to be there before we can park it on 3D visualization too.
Excellent. No, so I think that covers a lot in terms of where we've gone from, kind of traditional data right the way through to what we're seeing now in terms of the advancements of 3D and what that's done. You've all shown some great stories today, and really appreciate that. And I think that's something that everyone here should take away as innovative stories that they can start to spearhead themselves as well. But if I may, if there was one last piece of knowledge, piece of information that you would like to share to the crowd today, if I may just jump down the row and go from there.
So this is something that I want to say. So we have been talking about 3D, and everybody just think that is the direction that we are moving towards, but not forgetting that 3D includes 2D. 2D is still very important. In all the problems you want to solve, yes, some of the problems you need 3D to solve. But many of our problems, you want to simplify it. You still want to look at 2D. And when we say we are doing 3D mapping, what it means that is 2D mapping as well underneath the 3D. Right? So that's very important. Products-wise as well, we still very much focus on 2D, simplify the real-world environment into 2D, because 2D is still very useful for many, many applications. I just want to remind everybody on that.
Great point.
Mine is going to be much, much simpler than Dr. Khoo's wise words. Keep it real, keep it relevant, and let the benefits reveal on its own. Yeah, thank you.
I guess from my end, it's more about the application side of things, right? So we always have to find something that's realistic for it to be applied, for the technology to be applied to, and to be able to use that as a showcase to some extent to show the significant value add. That's how you can get the message across management or organizations basically on the viability and the usability of geospatial technology.
Yeah, and coming from my personal perspective, so I don't come from a geospatial background, but I think really having the user-centric kind of focus is pretty important, because to engage our ground staff, you can have very, very good technology, but how do they really use it? How do they really want to use it? I think that's very important. And like what Gillian said, we started very small. It's a small project, but we can see there's potential to develop further. So start small. Yeah.
Yeah. If I could say something, if in developing new technology and tools, do not forget about training and building up capabilities, not only amongst your users, but also your management. If I could share an anecdote in URA's journey in digital planning, for example, when we first embarked in digital planning, and we were showing our bosses all these wonderful things you could do, many of them had very unrealistic expectations about how the tool could be used. For example, say, oh, you are using 3D, you can give me the results tomorrow, right? It's so easy. So what we did is to conduct executive courses where we brought our bosses and trained them themselves about how to use the tool, give them an appreciation about the process, and we found that enabled us to have more meaningful exchanges about what could be done and how technology could support our work. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, so it's really about including everybody into that conversation. Exactly. From the user perspective, top down, bottom up, both applies when it comes to how we're bringing in those conversations to make best use of the data and best use of the conversations and making the right decisions. So, excellent. Thank you so much. We tried to get through as many of the questions as possible. If your question wasn't answered today, please do reach out to one of the team and we'll get back to you, because we'll still be chatting and networking throughout the rest of the afternoon. But with that, I'd just like to give a quick round of applause and thank you to the panelists, because there was a lot to cover today and a lot to get through. So thank you once again.